everybody, it's Matt McQueenie, Mix Minus Podcast. I am back from vacation, and today I'm officially 35 years old. Back on July 13th, 1982, I was born, and 35 years later, here we are. There's something about, I think, the age of 35, the age of 30, the age of 25, the age of 40, whenever you're at a 5 or a 10, it just feels like a real reflection and inflection point for your life. And I think once you get up towards 35, 30 feels stark, just moving into the third decade of life, or I guess that would be the end of the third decade of life, right? But once you move out of your 20s, you start to feel like that's the point where I am an adult. This is where I have things figured out. This is where the rubber hits the road in life. I know where my career is. I know what I'm going to do next. I know what I learned in my 20s. I got everything out of my system. I think that's frequently the feeling we have, is that we get things out of our system. But the day after you turn 30, you're still the same person you were 10 days ago when you were in your 20s, 2 days ago, yesterday. And that whole idea of I'm going to get these things out of my system, I'm going to do everything I ever wanted to do, it ends up being kind of a false argument for yourself, because you really should always be striving to want to do great stuff. No matter what your age is, you should never be settling because of age. You should be trying to push ahead. I was just reading in The Economist, they had a whole special section on aging, and they're saying how 70 is the new 60 and how there's something called pre-retirement. So people are at the age where maybe in the past that was the time where they should be done working, but they're not ready to be done working. They still feel young. People are getting apartments and shares, sharing apartments where 3 or 4 people live together, maybe because they're widows or they're widowers, or they just want to still live life. They don't want the calendar to say that they're done. And I think we run into that a lot. And all I can say is what I feel like at 35. And I don't feel like I'm even close to being figured out. And I don't think I'll ever feel figured out. I think I'm always striving for more. I'm always striving to be better. I'm always striving to create something new, to find a new path, to find a new skill, and to not let the years rub that out of you. Because if you start doing that, then what do you have to do moving forward? And I think for me, now that I'm 35 years old, I don't feel like I should. I think when you're a teenager, you look at someone who's 35 and you say, man, what the heck is that about? 35-year-old. Wow, that's extremely old. I remember being a little kid and they had that show 30-something, and it had that guy with the red hair and the red beard who was in the movie Field of Dreams, who was the one who told Ray that he was crazy and he wasn't seeing what he was and he was going to lose his farm. And I think that was the guy. And I remember seeing that and going, 30-something. Wow, that is so old, man. And now I'm here and I feel younger than ever. There are times my body's really achy. I just got back from vacation and I really tried to take part in all the facilities they had at this resort we were at, where they had a beautiful 25-yard length pool, and they had basketball court access, and they had weights, and they had a running trail. It was great. And I noticed when I tried to play basketball yesterday, which was the day after I swam for 30 minutes, which is probably the most I've ever swam in my life, which was about 30 laps, or I think I had it set wrong on my watch. But it's amazing with the Apple Watch now being waterproof, you can track your swim workouts. I'm sure people have been doing that forever, but for me, now I have the Apple Watch with the waterproof aspect, which I got for my birthday. Before I just had the first Apple Watch, and that did not have those capabilities. But I swam and I felt amazing. And then the next day I was like, I'm going to play some basketball. And I was worn down. Now it was hot as hell. It was the midday sun. It was the time when my little boy was napping. So that was the only opportunity I had to go and play. But I was in that midday sun and I just didn't have anything in my muscles. There was like nothing there to pull from. But I pushed through 40 minutes anyway. It ended up at 2 miles, which was an interesting thing. I guess I wasn't working hard enough, because when I run or I jog, you really do about a mile every 10 minutes at worst. But you do feel the concessions to age in that respect. Although 35 is not that old, and I think when I get to 40, I'll probably not feel that that's old either. It's all a mindset. But I think for me, when I hit 35, I feel like I should have something more figured out. I feel like I should have ascended more in my career. I should be at a higher level. I should be managing a lot of people. And I'm not there. Maybe it's because the kind of company I work at, which is a smaller company, and how many people really can you manage. You're managing your own portfolio of clients all the time, and maybe you have some people working for you, but there's just not many when you're a 15 to 20 to 25 person shop. It's just not there. You're sort of all co-equals in many ways. You have your developers, you have your designers, and you're sort of a project manager, a marketing person. And so you're all kind of at a graduate school level. There's not a lot of people below you who are coming up in the business. You're all sort of figured out where you are. And, you're contemporaries, as I said, but you feel like you should be doing more. And it really, again, I say it's a reflection and an inflection. You want it to be a jump off point to more, and you want to look back, and we often will think about the things that we didn't do right or that we didn't go for. But frequently, as I've come up to this age, what I've been thinking of over the last week is not to fall prey to recency bias, which means to pay attention only to what's happened recently. And you can feel at any point in time when you look at a chunk of time, you can have that chunk of time can look like it's failing for whatever reason. And then I think sometimes you got to stretch it, right? So maybe over the last couple of months, I feel like I'm stagnating a little professionally. The things I'm trying to do, my mind is always pushing. My mind is just, it's obsessive. It's all over the place. I can't hold it down from thinking I want to be doing more and more and more, and just not settling. It's very hard. And vacation was good for that, because vacation gives you a chance to get away, get outside of your comfort zone, and work within the confines of where you are, which allows your mind to settle to a degree, because it has to keep its focus on being in this new place and looking for new places to eat and new activities and doing this and that, and just being in a new place, which is nice for the body. I mean, coming home today, I really felt like my home was fresh. It's like your home becomes a vacation. You look at your normal spots where every night you sit to watch TV and you go, oh, it seems fresh right now, because you don't have all the biases sitting on you from being there 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 straight days without going somewhere else. So you have that week off and you come back and home feels completely fresh. But when I'm looking at being 35 years old, what I really wanted to look at is, it hit me, you know what? Look at 10 years. 10 years is a good amount of time to see what progress was, or to see what regression was, or to see where you should have been, what you should have been doing. And I look back to 10 years ago, which was 2007, early July, even July 13th, my birthday, and I was going to be 25 years old. And at that point, I was working at the New Jersey Nets, and it was that very week at the end of which I turned 25, because in 2007, Friday was the 13th. There's so many points in my life where, because you have the 13th and because there's only 7 days in a week, you're going to fall on that famous Friday the 13th date. But that year it was, and I even remember that year, Friday the 13th, July 13th, 2007, that was the official signing ceremony, the official press conference for Vince Carter, re-upping with the Nets. I think he signed a 4-year deal at that point. He was about 31 years old. And isn't it funny that now he's just signed with the Sacramento Kings for $8 million a year at like 40, 41 years old. The guy is amazing how long he has thrived and survived in the league, finding a niche and still playing big minutes and still scoring and dunking and being a really good teammate. That's a big key for him. The guy was a great teammate, and the guy was a great person. I mean, just getting to know him off the court where I was, you could just tell he had goodness inside of him. But it was 10 years ago, and it was my first time traveling for my job with the Nets. And traveling then meant going to the Orlando Summer League. That was my big first break. The team was going to allow me to travel down to Orlando and spend 5 days watching the new players, obviously the to-be rookies and the first-year players who maybe didn't do everything they were supposed to or they could have in their rookie year, so they go back to the drawing board a little bit in Orlando and try to mingle with the younger players and provide some leadership, and the team can see if they have something maybe that you missed during the year. I mean, we even saw that this year with Jaylen Brown, who was playing minutes in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then there he is playing alongside Jason Tatum on the Boston Celtics Summer League team. So it happens, you go from the penthouse to the outhouse, although I wouldn't call Summer League the outhouse. And it was great. I mean, it was awesome. It was the first time I got to travel. I was staying in the hotel with the team. I was staying in a hotel that had a lot of the other teams. They were all staying at this, I think it was the Westin Orlando. I remember being in an elevator with Adam Morrison, and he was a real moody, but I almost took it moody shy. But since he was like a top pick and he got all this money. I think sometimes when you're moody, shy, when you have a lot of expectations put on you, it can turn you into looking kind of like a prick. So I'm not saying he was a prick, but he didn't have much to say. But what is he going to say to me, some 25-year-old kid in an elevator with him? But it was a great time. I remember going to the treadmill each day, and I'd be there with the Nets head coach at the time, Lawrence Frank, and he would do his 5.8 miles per hour, and he'd go 60 minutes, which was really impressive to me to go that long, even if it's a little slow. But I got to know Sean Williams there. I got to know Marcus Williams was also drafted by the Nets. I got to know, I had already gotten to know a bit Hassan Adams, and he was there. I forget if that was his first year. No, I think he had played 1 year at that point with the Nets, but he was at Summer League. And it was just great. It's like 2 rows of people watching these high-level athletes and then these hanger-ons trying to hang and be on an NBA team and work their way through this summer league to get some kind of roster invite. But I remember sitting in this small little practice gym, just sitting center court. I remember taking a picture sitting center court, and I'm seeing future NBA players. It was really a fantastic experience, and I felt at the top of the world. 10 years ago, I felt like I had everything figured out. That next season, I'd get to travel as well with the team, which was always something that I will never forget, that I will never take for granted. It was one of the most surreal experiences of my life, to be on charter planes, to be at Ritz-Carlton hotels, to be spending time with announcers, to be getting to know players enough where they know me, to be part of the brotherhood in many ways, where I would be asked to go to a team breakfast, and I would be allowed to see what the team was up to with their game plans while eating breakfast amongst all these executives and players and coaches. It was something I'll never forget. And I look back at over 10 years, and I might say to myself now, with regret, oh man, I missed that. I missed that I had to leave that job for what I felt were professional reasons. I felt as though it was the type of place that didn't have great leadership in place, not on the basketball end, but maybe on the business end. And I just thought some things happened that made me feel that I wasn't going to be able to thrive there ultimately. I was sort of a shooting star that ascended quickly and then was brought back to earth. And the thing you learn in basketball and in sports is you can do a great job, but ultimately your standing is based on the team's standing. So if a team goes on a 10-game losing streak, fan interest is gone. Nobody's reading the website. No one's going to the games. No one's reading what you have to bring out to the world. You could write the greatest stuff, and a lot of times when a team goes on a losing streak, or it looks like their season's done, or they're going to have to rebuild, people don't want to read about it anymore. They want to forget about it, and they want to move on. And they're not going to sometimes trust what the team's writer has to say because, I mean, let's be honest, the team's writer is mostly saying the positive angles of things. And they're not reporting on the salacious stuff, or they're not reporting on the trade rumors. And it is what it is. But you do find that you can do the greatest job, but if the team is not something that fans want to watch or want to partake in the news of, you're going to sort of be out to sea. And you're going to have a cool job, but also you go and cover practice and everything's kind of negative, bad feelings. You feel bad asking questions. You get to know these people to the point where you go, boy, this is bigger than them. And they have to own it. They have to own struggles. Like a coach has to own struggles when maybe half of the team doesn't like each other and they're just not playing well. And you have to keep going day after day to practice. It's tough, and there's nothing you can do to get yourself out of this hole that's created by a team playing a certain way. But I still look back and I go, man, that was amazing. That was great. And so within this 10-year period, I was able to do that. But really the most important thing, and we have to remember, our life is one big group of many portfolios. And the professional is important, but the personal is really important. And I look back 10 years. And when I was at that summer league, little would I know that in 2 or 3 months, I would be meeting the woman I would marry. I had started talking to my to-be wife, Melanie, just before, I think, summer league, probably in the early portion of summer, late spring. And she was talking to me, and we'd be going back and forth. And I thought that she was a bot. I thought that she was a fembot, baby. No, I thought she was. I always felt Match had these bots, or they had these real accounts created by smart psychological people, and they would notice when subscriptions were coming to an end. This is my thought, and I think this did bear out fruit. This did show that it was true, and there was some class action suit. But when you'd be coming to the end of your subscription, you would notice that in the previous 2.5 months of a 3-month subscription, you would not get a lot of bites. You would wink at people, you would try to contact them, and you wouldn't get much. It's a big sea, and there's a lot of people conversing, and maybe you get lost in the crowd. And then when you get close to the end of your subscription, all of a sudden you're getting some winks, you're getting some nods, you're getting some notes, and you re-up to keep that conversation going, and then the person's gone. And you come to realize they were just doing that to try to keep subscriptions in place. They were trying to prime the pump and keep you in play. And so it was around that time that I was coming to the end of a subscription when my wife, my now wife, winked at me. And I looked at her and I said, "This is one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen." And that for me is always an issue. When I would date women, I would go, man, I could see this part of them that's attractive. Other people would tell me someone's attractive. But if you don't feel in your heart of hearts that they are exactly what you're hoping or looking for, and maybe you're being greedy, but if you don't feel that way, then you might marry that person, and you're sort of marrying them with a feeling of an out. You're marrying them thinking, well, this is the best I can do at this time. And maybe you convince yourself, hey, just like I was saying, you convince yourself, I'm going to live everything in my 20s and then I'll grow up. We're always evolving. We always want to do fun stuff. So putting those kind of lines in the sand about what you can and can't do, or what you're going to do in the future, always expect the person in the future is going to be the you right now. And like, what would you think about doing this thing you think you won't do in the future? What would you think right now? And a lot of times you go, oh no, I'd want to do it. So when you're 30, the 36-year-old, 35-year-old person is going to want to do it too. It's just always think that way. It's the same thing with procrastination. Don't think, oh man, I don't want to do this now. But you know what? 1 week from now, a day before the thing is due, I am going to lock down and I'm going to do it. No, do it right now. Just do it now. Do the thing you need to do now. Do the hard thing now, because you're the same person you'll be in a week. There's really not that much that's going to change. Maybe you're a little more rested. Maybe you got more caffeine. That could be worse though, too. I know a deadline is always something that pushes someone, but always be the person you want to be right now. Now, that doesn't mean break everything apart for short-term gain. Always look over the long term, but never expect you're going to be that different from the person you are now. I mean, just you're you. I mean, think about when you're a teenager. You mostly have the same kind of internal voice talking to you. Maybe it was a little less. Maybe it was a little less refined and a little less contemplative, but you always have that internal voice, and it doesn't change, I think, massively. And that's what I think always makes us feel like we're the same 16-year-old, is that internal voice that's inside of us. It's us looking through our eyes and not seeing a huge difference. It's us looking in a mirror and not seeing any difference, because we see ourselves every single time we look at ourselves. So it's not like, even when you look at a picture, maybe you can see yourself younger, but for the most part, I always see myself as what I am currently. It's just kind of what it is. But I always felt with my when I was getting these contacts from this woman, that she was a bot. And what I came to find out, and at the moment I was not discouraged by it, because I had this amazing opportunity. My life was set professionally. I was covering NBA basketball. I was traveling. I was one of the chosen people who get to do this magical thing and live a certain way, and just, feel greatness and sit next to greatness and be in the 1%ers. Travel is a 1%er. It was something else. I mean, charters, I still see it vividly in my mind, being on those trips and how great I felt inside. I've never felt so uplifted. And yes, I did. I'll tell my wife. I did when I got married and when I had a kid. Yes, I did. But this professionally was just absolutely off the chart. It was amazing. But I was ultimately not discouraged, because I had these opportunities. And, this woman who was contacting me did go away. But there was something to the way she was writing notes to me that was real. It was legit. She had actual care in her discourse with me. And we were going back and forth and talking. And then she just kind of fell off, and it made me go, oh, well, that stinks. And, I look at these pictures and I go, what is up? Well, what I really thought was maybe she found someone else. Because I'm telling you, when I saw these pictures, and you can see my wife now, I mean, she's one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. I mean, I'm never actually tempted by other people, because I found for me the most perfect, beautiful woman that I could ever want, the perfect conception of that. So I don't have a feeling of wanting to stray. I have what I want. Now, does it mean the next person thinks she's that to them? No. But for me, it's exactly what I want. And so that's what I thought, that she had gone away, that she had, found someone else. And that, like most people, she just wasn't going to come out and be saying to me, hey, I found someone else. Sorry, it was real good talking. So it went away. And I still wasn't, again, that discouraged because I had so much professionally that was uplifting me. And then I think in about late September, early October, I got a message back from her. And in that message, she told me what exactly had happened. That it was not she had found someone else. It was that she had lost someone. Her father had passed away in the intervening time. He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he had gotten better. He had gotten a clean bill of health, and then it came back with a fury. And it was in that summertime that it all went downhill. And she was living out of a hospital, going back and forth from where she lived for her whole life in Byram, New Jersey, with her mom there to Hackensack Hospital, back. Everything was focused on that pathway, basically, and everything was focused on that world. So she's not going to talk to me. She's locked in on that period of time and what she was going through. And so it was after that she contacted me and told me this, and it floored me. I mean, here was this woman who wanted to reach back out and pick up the pieces and look for relationships and look for connection so close after losing someone so important to them. And so I, of course, again, one of the most beautiful women who's ever winked at me. I'm probably going to say the only woman who's ever winked at me, but of anyone I can imagine, the most beautiful woman who's ever winked at me. And she kept this conversation going, and we ultimately met up. It was 2 weeks before the start of that 2007 NBA season, that one that I would get to travel on. And she reached out, and we went to a Starbucks. We have the story. We did an early podcast on this about our dating start and history. And we went to the Starbucks in Denville. Of course, there are two, and she went to the one in town, and I went to the one on Route 10. And through serendipity and good fortune, I got the call from her. We didn't have our numbers, but I was sitting in this Starbucks just completely alone. And the Starbucks barista, this woman, came up and said, "Are you Matt?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Someone's on the phone for you." And so the Starbucks phone, Melanie had called from the one Starbucks to this one and said, "Okay, you're at that one. I'll come meet you." So she came and meet me. I, of course, did not pay for her drink, which I feel like an adult for. But I look back at that, and that's 10 years. So 10 years ago, I was living the greatest success of my life to that point, and probably it will be something I'll never forget professionally. Getting to be on the floor at Summer League and see professional athletes play, getting the credential, being someone whose trip was paid for by a professional NBA team. An NBA team was paying my salary. I would get checks from the New Jersey Nets. My pay stub would say the New Jersey Nets. When it got direct deposited to your account, it would say the New Jersey Nets. I mean, that to me was nuts, that I was getting paid by an NBA team. I was professionally as set and happy as you could ever be. I lived and breathed it, and that's what a job is supposed to be. I mean, it really is supposed to be. Very few find it. And I think as many people who find their dream job find their dream spouse. I don't think it's perfect. I think to find both is pretty astounding. But it was in that point of intersection where I had my dream position, and then I ended up meeting my dream spouse. I had a lot of, I didn't have a lot of great dating history at that point. And it was not a matter of not finding people. I found a handful of people that I could have proceeded in relationships with, but I knew at that moment that I met them, I said, I could proceed on this. I could just be oblivious to what's going on, and I could tell myself, hey, let's just push this along and see what happens. But I knew in the moment that I met them, as great as they were, as awesome as the interplay of our conversation was, this was not someone I could marry. I just knew it. And I know that's terrible to say, because you got to remember Eugene Levy in American Pie. Hey, you gotta, you hit the ball off the wall, but sometimes you need to hit it with someone else. There is something to learning relationships and learning cohabitation that is important to practice on. But I never felt that was something that was worth doing at the expense of knowing the person was not someone you want to marry in that moment. And I think it's important to be struck by lightning in the moment you meet the person. I don't think you should meet someone and say, I couldn't marry this someone, but let me see if they grow on me. because I think with human relationships, it's the growing on you part is dangerous, because if they can grow on you, they can grow off of you. You can only be struck by lightning. That's a seminal moment if you're struck by lightning. I was going to say you can only get struck by lightning once, but maybe there are other people you could get struck by lightning with and move forward. But I feel like you have to know, and I think most people probably know in that moment. And yes, do people who aren't struck by lightning, relationship wise, do they get married? Yes. And do they maybe stay married for a long time? Probably. There's a handful, but I think from what you see with some of these divorce numbers, that a lot of people just get married comfortably. It's just something that feels comfortable. It feels like something that's maybe it's not the most exciting relationship. Maybe you're not head over heels attracted to the person and who they are and what they strive to be, but it feels good enough. And you say, oh, look, maybe I'll do this right now. This is a good decision. Maybe I'll have kids and I'll be better. And hey, I love my kids, and each day it's okay. But it's sort of like having a job that's okay. And I was struck by lightning, and maybe a lot of people are not, but I knew in that moment. And I was wearing a horrendous, as she tells me, t-shirt that night when I met her for the first time at that Starbucks. But I just think there's something in that moment. I remember seeing her and going, oh my God, when I met her in person, I said, this person's going to talk to me? Oh my God. And we continued talking. And remember, we had this whole conversation about her father. And it was, I was locked in. It was like having the greatest podcast interview of your life, where you have your dream guest and the person is completely engaged in the conversation. And I was locked in. I loved it. And I couldn't wait to talk to her again. I wasn't hemming and hawing and thinking, oh, should I, shouldn't I? Because I knew in that moment, this is the person I could marry. Don't screw this up. Continue this. And I remember we wouldn't talk a ton because it was right at the start of that relationship. Again, our second date was the opening of the Prudential Center when the first Devils game in Newark in 2007. So we had a date the week later after we met in that Starbucks. And then it was after that, I didn't see her a ton because I was living in Mahwah. I was into the teeth of an NBA season, which is constant late nights, home games. And of course I started traveling. So I was so focused on that. She's a school teacher. We would have little conversations here or there. We would meet on the weekends when I was home. But we germinated this relationship really slowly. And it's not like we were seeing other people at all, but we just had our professional lives going on. And so it was kind of a slow, I don't want to call it a burn, but it was a slow engagement in many ways before we really got to the point where we said, oh my gosh, I really like you. And I remember she always says that we were in New York City one time, and she said, I was ready to say I love you. And there was one point we were in a bar by Times Square. It's a kind of Irish themed bar. And you come to realize those things around Times Square are probably not the greatest places to go, that they're sort of touristy. It's like going to Disney World or Disneyland, New York. And I remember sitting there, and dumbass me, but maybe it's why she likes me. I remember having this red ale, which is like an Irish beer. And I look back at that self now and I laugh at myself with as refined as my beer tastes have become with IPAs, and even just getting back from Vermont, ostensibly to go on a trip to buy the best IPA in the world that you can only get up there. I know I was able to finagle it around having a family vacation, but let's be honest, I came home with 2 cases of some of the greatest beer in the world. But I remember this red ale, which is not anything special to write home about at this point when I'm thinking about it. But I remember having a sip, and for some dumb reason, I go, oh my God, I love, and she said her heart jumped because she thought I was finally going to say I love you. And I said, I love this beer. And I put it down, and she was just like, oh my God. She told me this later, of course, once we actually did talk about that kind of stuff and use that language. And I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I use that language now. That's one thing she brought to me that is amazing. She opened up this, not heart of darkness, but this hard heart. But I look at these 10 years, and that's what you got to look at sometimes. If you feel like you haven't done enough lately, if you have the recency bias of it all, think a little harder about it and really look at what you've done. Look at it in a way that does show, because it's sort of like investing. You know, they always have, like, when you're looking at a stock, it'll always say, maybe this quarter it's up this much. Its 1 year average is up this much. Its 5 year is up this much. Its 10 year is up this much. Lifetime is up this much. And there's always going to be a blip in that period where maybe there was a recession, or maybe there was some bad news that dropped the stock really hard. So if you had bought that stock just before that drop, you're feeling real bad with recency bias about how that stock is doing. But if you had it for 10 years and you rode that high, it even went through the drop and still came out on top a large percentage up. So you need to look at your life in bigger chunks. You can't feel like you're a failure because you might make a bad decision. You might jump into something just for the kind of midlife crisis aspect of jumping into it, for something fresh, for something new, for someone new, for a job that looks compelling, and you don't think that hard about it, and you say, you know what, screw it, I'm throwing caution to the wind on this one, and you push it and you go for it and you do it. And that's not the best sometimes. You really you want to kind of look at life in that stock way. You want to say, what's my quarter average? What's my year average? What's my 2-year? What's my 5-year? What's my 10-year? And when I look at even my 5-year, I started this podcast coming up on 4 years ago, and I've learned so much from it. I've gotten so many opportunities off of it, and I still want more. It's still not the apotheosis of what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to have, you want it to have tens of thousands of listeners per episode at some point. You want it to have sponsors knocking down your doors to do this. You want it to get picked up by a conglomerate of some sort, even if it's a podcast conglomerate, a podglomerate, I guess. You want more and more and more. But sometimes you got to step back and you got to say what I've gotten out of it. I've gotten 225 plus episodes of stuff that means a lot to me. I've learned and met a lot of people I've learned from, and I've met a lot of people who I wouldn't have otherwise. I mean, I think of all these people I now talk to regularly outside of podcasting because of this podcast, because I've chosen to exhibit out to the world what I'm thinking, or I've chosen to bring on guests. I've chosen to bring on people from my life, from the past 10 years, from the past 15 years, with my parents from the past 35 years now. And I learn a lot, and I'm amazed that these conversations can even drive to hundreds and hundreds of people, that these conversations would be had anyway, and they're reaching so many people. It's something that really, I would say, lightens my heart, and I've learned so much. Is it the highest level of what you're hoping? Do a certain amount of people of any importance reach that level? No. Is it important to keep striving for that? Yes. But is it important to be overwhelmed by it? No, because if you're overwhelmed by it, you'll quit really quickly. You have to see your little wins. You have to take the losses and learn from them. And really, what is a loss? It's what you decide. It's what you decide it is. It's what you define it. And so I look at these years. As I said with the podcast, I look at 5 years, what I've done in the 5-year chunk, and I look at it 10 years. 10 years ago, I did not know that 3 months later, even in the midst of my most personal or professional glory, 3 months later, I would meet the woman I would marry. And the woman I would have one of the most amazing children ever with. And we would just get back from a vacation. Who would think 10 years ago, what I was going through, that 10 years later, I'd be having one of the all-time trips with these new people in northern Vermont, having great IPA beer, going out to dinner, seeing my best friend from when I was 10 years old coming up. I mean, you always got to remember the victories. We even in sports, not every team in the league wins the championship every year, and many don't win it for decades. Many don't win it for 5, 10, 15 years. But there are victories in every season. We can't all be the Golden State Warriors. We can't all be the New England Patriots. We can't all be the Chicago Cubs. And look, they won last year magically, and they've fallen off this year. But they still can have a run. You can still have a run in life. You always can. You're always at a reflection and an inflection point. So it is with that that I thank everybody in advance for the happy birthday wishes I will be lauded with. And here's to another 35. So thank you, folks. Bye-bye.